my voice on this lovely Tuesday morning
At least you're not talking about your pants this time.
an early hour. I do have pants on. I've gone full pants today.
That's great because we're live
Awesome.
and pants are required.
Awesome. Hello. I'm Franz. This is the Concrete5 Town Hall. It's good to be here, and we got a lot of stuff to get into and through. So I'm just going to jump on into it. Let's see. First and foremost is a sneak peek notification. Probably should wait, but we'll be posting to the blog soon anyways. We got our ISO certification. So yay! Long, hard work, but official. We're going to have new logos and stamps of approval from ISO. So more about that coming soon. Don't want to spoil it, but that's nice and exciting. Second item on our agenda here, some things shifting or coming together with the concrete5.org community rebuild stuff. So we've been talking about this for a while, and nice to see the wheels slowly moving here. I guess to kind of take a step back and catch everybody up to speed, there's a strategy there of decentralizing a lot of stuff that we've done with concrete5.org in the past. Way back in the day, it was just one beefy server. And over time, we've already started to kind of shave things off. So Mlocati runs a translation service. That's a separate Concrete5 install. Documentation is a separate Concrete5 install. The marketing site, kind of the top level pages, is a separate install. And so we want to continue down that approach of kind of turning the various completely different things that concrete5.org has to do into more of a microservice architecture. Historically, that's not news, and historically we've talked about the next step with that being setting up a single sign-on server that we've been working long and hard on for the Army, which is exists and is stable, and we just need to port over and figure out how we're going to roll out with the community. We've been doing a bunch of internal process discussion, as you can imagine from the ISO announcement just a second ago. And so we've been experimenting with new technical documentation artifacts and ways to communicate with the software development lifecycle and kind of plan things out in more consistent and clear ways up front. I think historically, Andy and I have been working together since the 90s. So we have a pretty easy ability to say, hey, this one's just like that. Can you just stub it out and let me see what it looks like in a couple of weeks? And so we are strategically trying to move away from that and do a better job of focusing our energy on getting that stuff out of kind of our shared knowledge and into a written format. And we want to share all that stuff with you. So we are we've been in the forums, and I know Mike and Corbin are in Slack as well, kind of soliciting and listening to feature requests from really across the board. So I know often it starts with kind of marketplace developers, but I think we're really eager to hear feedback towards all the kind of loose ideas that we've thrown around, so we can get this stuff, well, I'd like to say on paper, but I guess it's not on paper, in Confluence, and then we'll figure out how to share Confluence or get it out into a system that we can share. So as we start rolling stuff out, it'll be clear kind of what we're shooting for. And as folks have ideas, they can, offer them and get them get other people's feedback on them and get them included if they're sticky, or if they have time to help. It's clear where that help will be best applied. So with that kind of context, I guess I'll toss it over to you, Andy, to talk a little bit about what you've been doing over the last couple of days on a more kind of granular level with splitting the stuff up.
Sure. Yeah. So as Franz mentioned, we have some of these sites that are more distributed and they're more purpose built for just one particular thing that they do. And one of those sites is the documentation site. So this is documentation.concrete5.org. We open sourced that site at least a year ago. It is on GitHub at github.com/concrete5/documentation.concrete5.org. Unfortunately, and so we've been accepting pull requests there. Unfortunately, the site as open source was only sort of open sourced partially. And it was kind of confusing because we open sourced the theme, on that site and included it in the repo that the site doesn't actually use anymore, because the theme that these sites use is shared and is brought in through Composer. So there's a concrete5 docs theme on that site that is actually not in use at all on the live documentation site. So if you make pull requests to it, you'd be mystified as to why they are not appearing on the site. So as part of this, I'm getting ready to do some continued development on our concrete5.org stack. We have open sourced the concrete5 theme that is actually used as the shared theme between all of these sites. So you can find that at github.com/concrete5/add-on_concrete5_theme. This is pulled into the documentation site on deploy, and so we've updated the site to pull in the proper theme as well. And we've also made it easier to install. So I've included some installation instructions on the documentation concrete5.org repo that shows how to install it, how to select the right installation starting point, which will install the shared theme, install the special Concrete5 docs package, and kind of set it up with blank sample content. So you're not going to get the full documentation site as it is on documentation.concrete5.org, but you should get a skeleton to run a documentation site or poke around at the code that we use and maybe improve it. And so that is one big thing. It's been sort of hanging overhead forever. It's felt really bad to have a purportedly open source site that no one could actually commit to and was not easy to work on. So that is nice to have fixed. We are also using that shared theme across different sites. So as you make improvements to it, they would all roll out to different sites as well. And then with that in mind, we have also added a new repo at github.com/concrete5/community.concrete5.org. This is mostly empty at this point, but it does have the similar approach to the docs site, whereby you can install it with a Concrete5 community starting point. It's going to use that shared theme. There's nothing there yet because we didn't really want to just jump into building stuff, but this is the installation. This is the project where you can expect to see the shared user server come together, the user portal stuff, all the My Account stuff that we do that's custom for concrete5.org. That's where this is going to be, and this is where you can expect our new forums to start getting built. So these sites, we actively want to start using GitHub issues for these. We will be doing sort of architecture on our end in Confluence as we do for our other internal projects. We're exploring to see if it's feasible for us to open this up to the community as well, but GitHub issues work really well as well. So we would like to, we will work to kind of synchronize those two systems if there's no way to use just one system for these things. But we do actively want to get discussion around these two projects in GitHub and in Slack, and then maybe Slack can become a GitHub issue or something along those lines. And we really want to put those out there so that we can start development on them internally, and the community, can see that development happen in semi-real time, as opposed to just going dark for years and emerging with these new fancy sites fully formed. We want
shiny
to have
new
a more,
baby that no one wanted.
we want a more collaborative approach. And cool. then finally, we're going to do the same thing for the marketplace site. And I think that doesn't have a repo yet. We were going to be documenting that a bit before we actually start building that as well. But I think at this point, I'll toss it back to Franz to talk over some of our thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, I don't want to go into too much detail this morning because we've got a bunch of stuff to get through. Yeah. And I feel like a lot of this belongs in documentation, right? So, I mean, we've already talked about decentralizing stuff. I think we've mentioned a little bit about wanting to explore using Community Store as an actual commerce engine. So we're not rebuilding the wheel. I know the number of people on our staff that are interested in shipping methods and tax is about 0. So anything we can do to kind of leverage the good work that Ryan and gang have done over there would be great. So there's some cool ideas there, and I think the next steps are for us to figure out how to share them from a communication standpoint. There is a thread in the forums around marketplace improvements and what marketplace devs feel like could help with the next version of the marketplace. So there's definitely some good back and forth in there. If you are interested and you haven't been part of it, you should go find him posted. I think it's just in Chit Chat. I don't think it's anywhere hard to find. And I'm sure there's active discussion in Slack as well. I know there's a lot of folks there that are eagerly tossing ideas back and forth, and we're hearing about that from Mr. Mike Larson and Corbin. So keep it up, and we will continue to kind of open up the process a little bit more, which is a lovely segue to the next point on our agenda here, training. So Mike and Corbin have been leading a, what is it, first and third or second and fourth Thursday? Every other Thursday-ish. These guys lead a hour training session at noon Pacific. And, we started it with the mandate of we just got to do something, getting it on the schedule and making some bright folks on our team available to talk about a subject, but then kind of let things go as they as the community pushes it would be helpful. So we've been doing that for a handful of sessions now. I think what we've learned out of that so far is it is well received, and it would be cool to have kind of more of a what would you consider it? More of like a season, a multi-episode season, if you will. So somebody, I'm going to forget their name. I wish I'll look it up while someone else is talking. Somebody reached out to me via email and pointed out that building a theme with concrete5 today was complicated for them, which struck a nerve for me because back in the day when we first launched back in 2008, we made a basically one cut video of Andy grabbing a Halloween theme from Theme Forest and concretizing it, if you will. And he did it all in 30 minutes. It was pretty easy to follow along. The theme ended up in the marketplace for free. There's some doc pages that we made after the fact, but mostly you could just kind of sit back and watch this video over lunch and get a pretty simple idea of, I can just drop 2 lines of PHP in there and I got a block area. Absolutely a competitive advantage at the time. It was very easy to concretize anything. As our framework has matured and the PHP ecosystem has grown up and become a little bit more robust, shall we say, Corbin? It's not quite as easy to concretize a theme. And so someone had complained to me that, like, man, it'd be really cool if I could easily concretize a theme and if I knew how to do that. And I struck a bell. I thought, aha, we should be doing that. I'm being told that was from Tiggs. Thank you, Tiggs. It was a good idea. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to go find ourselves a free theme from Theme Forest, and we are going to have, last time I looked, it was, I think, 5 or 6 classes that we had broken into. It might get chopped back down to 4, but we're going to basically take you through the whole way that we would approach the problem. And so that first class will actually be me, Evan, and Andy going through and writing what we call a technical outline of work, where we kind of break down, we take some screenshots of the various page types in a theme, and then we break down, this is how we would approach this. This is a page type, this is a block, this is a custom template on a block, and we'll kind of go back and forth over what are some of the different advantages of different approaches and limitations. So really just start kind of high level architecture. The next class will be doing the basic theme chop. Generally, we would start with okay, here's the basic page, and let's get all that stuff working with the grid system. And we'll continue to kind of get more and more technical as it goes. So those will that will be exciting. We'll do our best to make it so you can drop in on any of them and learn something. Definitely don't want to make it, hey, you need to stop and go back and watch these other 3 first. Try to make them each granular, but we're also going to do our best to make it a linear path that you could sit down and watch all of those through. We will do some write-ups around it, and that will turn into level 2 certification over time, which we've had in the past for earlier versions of concrete5. Right now we have level 1 certification for version 7 and above, which is basically how do you use the thing. Level 2 is really how do you do a basic theme, how do you make an average site, and then level 3 is how do you become an Andy or a Corbin. How we get to level 3 remains a mystery, but this will get us to level 2. So good news there with the training stuff. Let's see. Moving right along to this constantly shifting agenda. Oh my goodness. First translations of an Arabic language in the new translation system. So that is very cool. Mike Larson, do you want to speak to this a little bit? You did so eloquently earlier.
Yeah, I can only sort of report secondhand after helping out, or I guess Imlakadi did all of it. I just sort of talked back and forth between him and the team over here. But yeah, apparently Imlakadi has arranged for an Arabic translator and submitted some pull requests to gracefully handle the right to left languages as well as left to right, and got that in. And it looks like the Arabic translation is already about almost 50% done for the core concrete5. So props to Imlakadi for arranging that and expanding the linguistic reach of concrete5.
It's so cool. Something magical about seeing your software show up in different languages that are laid out in weird ways. It's fun to be part of something bigger than we could ever do ourselves or would imagine. Let's see, documentation updates. I think this is back to you, Andy. Are you providing documentation?
I know, I am. Yeah, so someone was asking in Slack a couple weeks ago for some clarification and information on how to access and work with the REST API that we've kind of introduced in version 8.5. It's really more of the kind of beginnings of the API because we've got all the plumbing in, but we don't actually have it. We don't actually have the shower heads installed or whatever you want in terms of a metaphor. But they were asking for kind of details about how to connect to it, how to configure it, that kind of thing. And we haven't really provided any of that. We just kind of dropped it in 8.5, and it's for us, and and then no one else. And so we, so a couple weeks ago, I made a screencast. It's in a new section of the documentation site. It's just called Introduction to the REST API, and it basically goes through how to configure it and turn it on in a concrete5 site, and query it using Postman in the example video. It's pretty quick. It doesn't go into any details about how to extend it or write your own APIs using the underlying REST API support. So that is actually something I'm working on this week. So to piggyback on that, check out that REST API video. Make sure you like and subscribe. And then yeah, and you can expect documentation this week. Probably no videos, but documentation this week on our new routing engine, controllers views, and REST API support at the developer level in concrete5 8.5 this week. So that will be coming to the developer docs this week with an eye toward, this is for developers who want to, it's for two things. One, it's for developers who want to use our routing system and REST API underpinnings to create their own REST APIs in packages and things like that, which is useful. And we've already done that in our own packages using version 8.5. And it's going to be for those who want to sort of help us buff out the REST API in concrete5. So the next thing we need to do is actually add support for things that we already have in the core. So you can kind of see we've starting to get file reading and file listing functionality in the core. It's very new still, but my goal for this week is to get kind of a how-to and full documentation section describing what goes into making a REST API routing work, and how we are creating these routes, and how we hope that you can help us do that too, if that is something that you're inclined to do. So expect that to come before the end of this week, and I'm sure I'll announce it in Slack.
Nice.
Yeah.
Thanks, Andy.
Yeah, thank you.
While you're talking, you got any shout outs?
I do. We've been trying our best to keep 8.5.2 and the develop branch moving in GitHub. It's slow going. There's been a lot of good stuff, and it's kind of built up, honestly, since the beginning of the year. But we are making progress. I know Corvin's going through it as well. We're kind of moving some of the bigger things into the 8.6 dev branch while trying to keep some of the some of the smaller things moving in develop. And just a couple shout outs. Dimger, Dimger, has been poking around in the REST API a lot and looking into that. So it's nice to see that there's bright people investigating that stuff. And he has also been submitting some pull requests to fix some core bug issues. So that's really nice. And then another pull request I just wanted to point out, this is in the develop branch, is Marv Indy. He's in GitHub a lot the last few town halls, and this one is no exception. He has made it so that you can actually specify the background of a thumbnail in the file manager, which is pretty cool, honestly. Right now, your thumbnail just kind of is black when you resize it down to below the canvas, which is not tremendously compelling all the time. So he has made it so that you can specify a thumbnail at the thumbnail type level. You can make it transparent if you're so inclined, which seems like a reasonable default, honestly. And then also added that support to the image editor as well. So really touching a lot of aspects of the file manager, and without a lot of guidance from us, just really poking around and working on something till it gets accepted. So really nice work there. And I think Corvin has some other things he wants to mention as he's been going through GitHub as well.
Yeah. It's easy to glaze over just how much Mlokati does for the community, just because he's doing just constantly so much. And as I was going through, it really struck me that, right now we have something like 68 pull requests open. And of those, 23 of them were opened by Mlokati, and they're all high quality, all stuff that we're looking to merge. So great work from Mlokati. It's really inspirational, to say the least. If you take a look at the contributors to concrete5, the order goes Andy, Mlokati, and then me with about half as much, or even less than half as many commits as Mlokati. So really, really impressive. Great work there. And I just wanted to say, because Mlokati just took over another open source project, one of our dependencies that was it was at risk of being abandoned. So he took it over, and he's the lead on that now. It's the Imagine repository, which is no small feat, and he's killing it there too. So definitely super inspirational. I know I struggled to find that much energy. Last thing I wanted to say is I noticed that Mlokati is seeing a bunch of, he keeps finding issues in GitHub and fixing them either with pull requests or with open source packages that he totally releases for free and provides with support. So I just wanted to take a second to call out Mlokati, just because he does so much. It's just easy to forget and miss him when listing all the stuff, just because he's such a big slice of the pie. So thank you, Mlokati, for that. That's really cool to see, and definitely everything you submit to us is high quality, and we really appreciate it.
Thank you, McKellar.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a bit like a broken record, but it's true. There's so much good submissions come from him all the time. So nice work.
Mr. Mike Larson, do you have any shout outs this week?
Yeah, well, I'll continue the broken record and extend a little bit. So I wanted to look back at some of the people who have helped bring the announcements that Andy made to fruition by sort of pestering us and offering ideas and adding documentation. Mlokati was the one who actually submitted the pull request for exposing the edit this page button. So props to Mlokati, and also to Mr. K. Dilkington. He was the one that actually wrote up the really nice issue about it, describing how it should be done, and has been pushing for that for ever since I met him last year. So appreciate that. And then also sort of the unsung heroes, and of course this is an always incomplete list, but the people who actually do contribute to the documentation site. I know Hissy points out a lot of missing or incomplete documentation, and also a lot of people do contribute improvements to it, such as Bplop, Mlokati again, Mnakali, Sharok, Lemon Brain, Mineo, and of course Andrew Embler has also contributed some new REST API documentation. So thanks to everyone for that.
Thank you, everybody. All right. Well, look at that, a crisp half hour, and we're going to get into show and tells. So today there's two different things to show and tell about. I'm going to do a quick show and tell on some stuff that we've been doing, which I think will segue well into a project we kind of got turned on about, I guess a month ago. So let me see if I can share my screen without creating a feedback loop. Yes, I recognize it's shaky because I'm touching my computer. Share. And then I'll get rid of you. And there we go. Okay, so we're making a headless CMS because that's the cool thing to do these days. It's amazing how this stuff comes in cycles, but I guess to take a step back and kind of talk a little bit about different ways of approaching the content management problem. Concrete5 is middleware, so as you can see from this fancy diagram, fundamentally that means you've got PHP and MySQL talking to each other and returning a web page that we build through some type of web server. It used to be Apache, these days it's usually Nginx. So somebody requests a page, we do a bunch of math and queries, and then we spit back a page. This is super cool, and back when we used to FTP HTML files around, it was like a real mind opener that you could maybe reuse some code and occasionally maybe do some interactive stuff, and that was pretty much cool. And that's pretty much how all CMSs well, not all, that's how most open source CMSs at least worked. Drupal, WordPress, us, Joomla, any of them are basically middleware based CMSs. There were some platforms in the big enterprise end that were more of a publishing approach that feels a little more headless. But this is kind of how we all started, usually because you're building some kind of application and you're then going to call that a CMS. Well, over time, and as the web gained popularity, and as we started putting more and more stuff in there, and you could start to build forums and do personalization, all that kind of thing, it just got slow. And so then, there were years of creating caching layers and then using things like content delivery networks like Cloudflare and, kind of adding abstraction layers on so you wouldn't have to run 1,000 queries in MySQL to render a single page through Concrete5. And so, this is kind of how Concrete5 behaves for our larger clients today. We might put this stuff behind a load balancer, try to optimize the MySQL setup, or try to make really performance or high availability stack over there. But fundamentally, you're kind of looking at a caching layer and a bunch of math, and that works pretty well. It's easy to do stuff. What it is not easy to do is personalization, because that stuff changes with everybody who comes to the site. Or for us, practically, an ad server. So we have a client that needs an ad server, and that, even though we had an add-on way back in the day that would just do that, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to serve ads from the same site that you are serving your content with. Any ad blocker is going to block your whole site. And ads need to be really performant, and they need to render every time you come to a page. You want a different ad, and you need to track that impression. So you can't really use a caching layer. So enjoy this exciting new diagram of what in broad strokes you could call a headless CMS. So you still have Concrete5 over in that blue box. It still lets you build pages and do stuff. And you can still cache the bulk of that page. The thing that has changed here is we now can render some JavaScript in a div in the page that we call a spot. We talked about zones for a long time, but then we changed it to spots at the last minute. And so you can kind of place one of these spots on the page. And then when that goes down to the client browser over here, it says, oh, I see I got to go render some more content. So it calls a completely different server. So in our case, what is the web server on? Is that Nginx as well?
It's using Nginx, yeah. We have a couple ways to run it, but right now we're using Nginx.
Okay, so we're using Nginx, but the exciting part that's different is we're using a completely different database called Neo4j. that is super nimble, not very good at doing complex joins the way MySQL would, but very, very fast at pulling back a specific record and doing kind of some simple one-line query, if you will. And it is super duper fast. We'll talk about it more in a bit. But basically, we can still serve you a fully cached page via Cloudflare or a partially cached page from Concrete5. Your client browser then requests some additional content from the personalization server, loosely call it today, might change that. And it will then return content based on whatever kind of rules you want to put in there, that then renders in your page remarkably fast. The other thing to note on this diagram is there's then a second database. We're using DynamoDB today, that we copy data out of Neo4j, or we store kind of tracking data. Every time we render some of that content, we want to track that because this is an ad server. Excuse me. So that goes into this DynamoDB, where we can then do reporting so we can see how well things are doing. So with that as context, I'll show you a few screenshots of what we did with it. Zooming in. What we did is we built a ad manager, and we did that as a separate Concrete5 install. It uses single sign-on, so it's kind of part of this larger network that we're managing for the Army, but it is a destination site that you cannot see the URL to. And you can see, if you have an imagination, this is actually kind of a cropped screenshot from part of the dashboard. So we use the dashboard welcome page to make it easy on our editors and be like, hey, here's the stuff that you actually need to do. We've got a few reports that those are going to hit that DynamoDB through the API. And then we've got some quick links to making ads. And I don't need to train you on how to use the ad server, but in broad strokes, there's customers. Customers have what you would probably consider a campaign, but we call agreement, and campaigns then have ads. So all of that is, pretty basic relational data that you just need a functional CRUD interface. So being us, we used Express. So here we have a sanitized version of the list of customers, and you can see it's just an Express deal. We made these objects in Express and made joints between them. Here we are. You can see a little bit of the sidebars. You can see, we've just pulled these pages out, and they're right there. But for every customer, I can add an agreement where you can give it a. Whoops, what did I just do? There we go. You can give it a name and all that kind of obvious stuff. You can put some date limits or limit by impressions, just all the metadata we want to collect about this stuff. And then at its most granular level, I'm just switching between views and the screenshots to make it fun. Here's an actual ad, right? And so again, it's just an Express object. It's got a name. It's got the URL you want to point to. We can do relative URLs, which is kind of fun. And down below where I brilliantly took the screenshot is an actual image and a form factor that goes with it. So all of that builds the ad data, if you will, which then gets exported via CSV and imported into Neo4j, which looks like this. Neo4j has a GUI interface after my own heart because I love the neural node ball floating things around, and this is much more compelling when you're looking over Corbin's shoulder as it all floats around and pan and scans, but we're not going to show you all the real data. But if you've got an imagination, the little red dot is a form factor, the little green dots are specific ads, and the little blue dots are agreements. So you can see how we pass that relational data into Neo4j. It builds these connections, and so it can very, very quickly return an ad. So if I...
One thing to note about that view that you were just showing,
sure,
we have a whole lot more data than is shown here. This is just the maximum that the tool will output.
Yeah.
So if this was showing the whole thing, these nodes would be real small, and there'd be a whole lot of them.
Yeah. It is amazingly fast. I'll let you talk about it when I'm done doing the high-level stuff. So here is an actual site. You're welcome to go to this. It's public. hood.armymwr.com. Check it out. But we're serving ads on it, right? Boom, boom, boom. There's ads down here at the bottom somewhere. There's 3 more, right? And the way they get there, if I view the source, here's a div container, data spot, and we give it an ID. And Corbin, where's the JavaScript that we actually call in the first place?
This will be at the bottom. So what you have selected here is the actual element that is going to be replaced. So search for LBA dot. There you go.
There you go.
So that's all the JavaScript that we include.
Boom. So yeah, we put one JavaScript on the page. We drop those spot divs wherever we want to cycle out some content. That then calls, I'll bring this bad boy back up. That then calls fast server McGee, which looks up, says, oh, okay, I see you're looking for a spot. We can define those rules over time. So right now we're building an ad server, but there's no reason that we couldn't serve up personalized content, or use instead of building stuff out of Express and sharing it through Neo4j as an ad server, we could be doing more of an application, like when you log into your credit card account and you get the whole interface and it serves up your actual balance and that kind of stuff, post page processing. But pretty cool, kind of abstracting Concrete5 from the delivery mechanism a little bit. And the last part is this reporting API. So when we serve an ad, we track that with a pixel call, and that then gets tracked in DynamoDB, not Neo4j, because Neo4j is very temporal. When we import new content, we tend to blow away the old stuff. So here we go. When you get over to reporting, this is a very short screenshot of a report of, look, how many times have we served that ad? How many clicks? What's the click-through ratio? All this stuff gets fed. This is obviously Concrete5. It is hitting an API that speaks to DynamoDB and pulls this stuff out. So as far as the client is concerned, it's all just in Concrete5. I can see my reports. I can add my ads. They do have to wait. I think we update ads every hour on the hour. So, I mean, you could run that as fast as you want. That seems like it's more than enough for an ad server. But pretty exciting. Quite a lot going on behind the scenes. Certainly have matured this kind of basic middleware solution with a bunch of caching on top into something that's much more application focused, which is great, because that's absolutely the way we see Concrete5 maturing. Is a really great framework for building sites that have a marketing component and need some content that is managed, but also do much more. And Corbin, I'll toss it to you to talk about how quickly we serve these ads up.
Yeah, there's a couple things about that I wanted to mention. The first thing, you mentioned the high availability and fault tolerance of it. And I think that's kind of a big part of the whole reason why we separated this stuff out. One of the main values of having this be like its own microservice that has the ability to be, super small and portable and not attached to another project is that we can cater it to certain types of hosting situations. So for example, we've gotten this running in Lambda with, if you're not familiar with Lambda, Lambda is entirely serverless. So you just give it code and it'll essentially run that code for you when people request it. And so the value of Lambda is that it can infinitely scale, depending on your budget, to support whatever kind of throughput you're seeing without you having to worry about any of that like architecture or infrastructure. So that's one of the big values we got out of that. We could throw this super fast server on Lambda and host it just completely in the cloud with no server architecture underneath it. Or we could, have these be on scalable containers and manage the scaling ourselves. And so the high availability fault tolerance becomes super simple and almost essentially a solved problem. So that's the first thing I wanted to mention. The second thing, the reason why we opted for using these different kinds of databases instead of using something like MySQL is because these databases are catered to dealing with just massive amounts of data without slowing down. And it's kind of more evident with Neo4j, at least for me, because Neo4j is a whole different kind of database. It's a graph database, which actually caused a little bit of confusion with us because we're using React PHP and a graph database on this project. And we've got Lemon Brain who's using React.js and GraphQL on his own project. And we had a little bit of internal confusion on that. But yeah, having the graph database allows us to put those expensive joins first and set those when you insert the data. And so to me, the way I kind of conceptualize these things is that the graph database is an accumulation of values and their relations. So there's no joining. You've already joined it when you did the insert. So by doing that, you can kind of traverse this graph really, really, really quickly, as long as you don't need to do any joins that you didn't preempt. So that gives us some huge wins. And with terabytes of data in this thing, we can get data out of it in sub-milliseconds, which is just incredible to me. The second end of that is DynamoDB, which is our high availability key value store. The reason why, Franz mentioned, the reason why we put our tracking data in a separate service other than Neo4j is mostly because Neo4j needs to be kind of safe to throw away and replace anytime we need to. But also because that impression data isn't really relational at all. There's no reason why an impression would need to, be related to any other data and use that graph functionality. Really, it's just rows. And so we didn't need that level of management for those entries. So Amazon DynamoDB is a great solution in that we can kind of just throw records at them, and it'll manage storing them in the proper order, and it'll manage essentially infinite amount of data. The sales information about it is talking about like hundreds of terabytes, and we're not likely to get there. So those are the main reasons. Last thing I'll say is that all culminated to us being able to take a request from a site that's requesting, any number of ads and return those ads to be placed on the page within, right now, the average time with Nginx in the loop is 13 milliseconds.
There you go.
So that's pretty fast.
It's fast enough, man.
If we take Nginx out of the loop and use something like Lambda, past the first boot up, because Lambda can be a little bit slow to boot up, past the first boot up, we can get ads served in under 6 milliseconds. That's how fast it takes to actually do the placement, and from there on, it's just a matter of the network and all that. So incredibly fast. Definitely, some places where we could even speed it up further. We just have no reason to.
Yeah, that's pretty good, dude. I think we're
so
considering some of the load times we've struggled with in the past and successes we've called with caching layers. I feel like we are happily in the promised land here. So
it's definitely different to go from a maximum of like 300 to 500 milliseconds down to a maximum of 10. It's a different kind of project.
Yeah. So anyways, that's one of the things that we've been working on. Pretty cool. It's definitely purpose built to be an ad server at the moment, and it's not, there's nothing in here that's like an open source thing that we haven't documented fully that we're sticking in GitHub quite yet. But you can expect us to not document something and stick it in GitHub before too long with it, because there's something to this that is really compelling for building complex applications with concrete5, and we're all very excited about it. So that being shared out of what our crew is doing, we have a community member named Lemon Brain, whose real life name is Marco, who has graciously joined us from the other side of the world and has been working on, well, as Corvin would say, it completely unrelated in terms of technology, but from my perspective, also how do I deal with fast content on top of concrete5? So I'm going to toss it to him to get a sense of kind of what your project is all about.
Yeah, hi guys. I hope you can hear me.
Yes,
yeah,
great.
Okay. Yeah, I try my best to explain it in English and don't use too much Swisslish. I will talk some kind of about GraphQL and WebSocket servers. First, I will try to share my screen. All right.
It's me again.
Always you. So, how we came to this idea to build like GraphQL included in concrete5? It's because of work we do for a client for the government of Switzerland. They ask us for application which is running on a basic web server. So they gave us a Apache server, which we now use to do this application. It's built on React, and on the server side we use concrete5. So when we log into the application, we can create here different person. I'll just show you this to show you the problem we had, and then I'll show you the solution with GraphQL. So at the moment, you can see here there's just one person on it. So when we add a second one, so you can see here we have the new person, but because we are highly caching it on the front end, on the client, we don't see it on the second screen or on a different client somewhere else. So because of them, on the whole applications, there are these refresh buttons everywhere. So when we click on the refresh button, the data comes new from the server, from concrete5, and sends the data to the client. I think this should be quite clear now. I'll show you, this is really a concrete5 running in the background. So the whole data, like files and users, are coming from concrete5, and everything else is done by React. So the whole front end and person management and so on would also be English. All right, so I was thinking about this, and with the knowledge from Node.js, I was thinking about doing something with GraphQL and WebSocket. So I was reading a lot in my free time how we could include GraphQL in PHP, and I was thinking about this could be that difficult. So I created a composite package, which is located on GitHub. Maybe I can put the link afterwards in Slack, where you can find me also to talk about it. So there's like one GitHub project called GraphQL WebSocket, which does the whole magic stuff in it. So you need to add this package with Composer, because it adds some Composer requirement that it is working. So these are the requirements which will be automatically added when you add this package to your concrete5 Composer project. Yeah. Then there are some issues right now, but the whole thing will work when you install it. But the only thing which will work is like the merging. So when you use this package, you can use it in different other package where you do like applications like this one I showed you before. So the API schema will be merged from these different packages. So this merging tool is working with types, but it's not working with enums or interfaces and stuff like this. This is the only thing which is not running right now, but I'm on it. I think in the next 2 weeks it will come. So when you can see here, this is the description from GraphQL, and the whole type system is working. The merging is working. I show you later this stuff in the code. But the stuff down here, like scalars, objects, interface, unions, enums, and stuff like this, is not merged at the moment. But I will come to that in the next 2 weeks, I think. Yeah, so working with this package made me done this this little application here, which is also linked in the GitHub project. You can find it here. under this link. Also, a little documentation is on this GitHub project. So when you go to wiki documentation, you will find the whole documentation, how you can set up Apache, that it works with WebSockets. So there needs some config done. It's quite easy for somebody who is familiar with Apache. It should also work with Nginx, I think, but I have not tried yet. But this will be also a task I will do in the future. Then there is some description how you can define a GraphQL schema and resolver, and so on and so on and so on. It's everything down here. So let's go to the next showdown. Here we have like the people list, like the same I showed you before here. It's also open on a different client, or let's see here in a different tab. This one is working with polling, so every 500 milliseconds it gets a request to the server and gets the new data. The other one, like this one, is working with WebSockets, so it gets the data directly from the server. So when I change some data on the server, it will send the data directly to the client through the WebSocket. So hopefully it will work here. I add the person now. Now you can see here with polling it's added. It's like the new one here with 40. Yeah. The next one, and for sure now the WebSocket shows really cool project. It's the one which the last person added. Yeah, exactly. Okay. So coming from the outside, go a little bit deeper to GraphQL Playground. This is like a little tool. There's a lot of different tools like GraphQL Playground. There's also tools like GraphQL and stuff around this, which you can add to your project directly, like add it here with a / GraphQL Playground. Or you can open this application, which is also open source. You can download it, install it, and it will work out of the box. But this tool does is like it connects to your API. So you can define an API, a GraphQL API, and then you can connect to this API. So we are connecting here to this localhost API on GraphQL. And then because of the schema we defined for the API, we automatically get the documentation to the API, which I think it's really, really nice. So when you write an API and you just get all the documentations through it. Yeah, I show you later on the code how we write this. But what I want to show you, it's like you don't need really a front end as we have here. You just can use this one and can connect to different endpoints. So this is the production endpoint. This is the developer endpoint, which is on my local host. And then I just can write like a query to this endpoint. Let's open the documentation. So I have an endpoint call here, get people. So let's write a query, get people. So you can also see it helps me because it has the whole documentation on the API. Get people, then here it's a first name. So I can add first name and run it, and I get a list of all the people currently on my local host with their first name. I can also do the same with the WebSocket. So I have, okay, I can't. Don't know why, but doesn't matter for now. But it will also work with the WebSocket. And I can add like persons here, which is what also is really nice about GraphQL is like it is totally typed. So when I make a mutation, I can use this variable first name and it's type of string. So I can use here like a number. it will immediately tell me that something is wrong. I think this is really nice. So, going deeper and deeper. Next step. So we have this concrete5 project here. It's a composer project, as I told you before. So this composer project has at the moment like three different packages included. The one for the magic, the GraphQL WebSocket package, which normally is not interesting for the developer because he just installed this. And then you have this WebSocket sample package, which is also on GitHub, and which you can also install out of the box. So in this WebSocket sample, I will show you how these different kinds of stuff works together. So we have entities, like a normal person entity. I think the guys who work with concrete5 know how you can define an entity and run requests on the entity. So this is nothing magic. Then we have a folder GraphQL with the API schema I told you before. So here I define all the different types I can request or can work with. Then we can write queries like get people, which gives me an array of person. For sure, I could also add here like different one like get person and use their ID or something to get just one person. Stuff like this. All right. Then we have mutations. I think this is all like, as you read it, you know what is going on. So you can add a person, you can edit a person. And then the subscription, like the ones who works with the WebSocket. And there's also like a little bit of documentation inside here, which is also really nice. So when you have to describe some fields, you can just describe it here on the schema, and afterwards it will automatically come in your documentation. So when I go to get people, which gives me a person object, it just adds this description here. All right. So now how we can connect these two. So this is called resolver. So we have person resolver, which connects these two schemas together. So we have like this query type, which was the query get people here, get people, and we run just a request on the entity, which we defined up here. So we have here the person entity here, and we give all the entities back from the database, make a JSON object out of it. I just use this because that I have a proper array. And I can do the same like for the mutations. So add persons is like the same. I think this is quite clear what is happening up here. And down here, we can send the data through the WebSocket. So this is like an event called person edited, where we can add this new where we can send this new person we just created. Yeah. So I also built a little class here, like a static class, which builds all the stuff together. As I told at the beginning, we need some merging, because when we use like a sample package 2, let's say, or something like this, we can use the same schema builder and merge these new files in it and together. Yeah, my English goes versa versa. but I hope it's quite clear what I mean. And this function gets called by the controller of the package. So when I go to the controller, on the on start, it gets run here. And let's go back. So this is the start function, the static start function. It uses this schema builder, which is coming from this concrete GraphQL WebSocket package here from the Magic package, which adds some dashboard to your concrete5. So when we connect to concrete5, I use now my local. Maybe this one is a little bit faster than the online one. Or not. So on the system settings, environment, there you find the database entities settings. I think some of you know how this works. And there's also this refresh entities, and there's also like this developer mode. So I tried to copy this to make it quite similar so that it is for somebody who uses also entities like the same thing. So on the top here, you see this GraphQL settings, and here's also this development mode. So when you disable this, it will not build on the go. So this merging stuff, the code here, which merges the different GraphQL schemas together from the different project or maybe also from the core in the future. I don't know how, from where. It will not be automatically running. So when you put it to on and save it, it will be always running when you connect somehow to the endpoint. When it's off, for sure, you can use this refresh GraphQL schema, then it will run just once. When you run it, the merged file will be in your application folder under config GraphQL merge schema. So this is the merge schema. For sure, now it looks exactly the same because we have just one schema. When you use different schema, it will be merged together here, inside here. And this one is the one which uses the endpoint at the end. Good. Here there are like some security issues. I think I don't want to explain it. There's a little description here right on the mouse over. You can also read about it when you go deeper into GraphQL. So this is all like the normal stuff you can use in GraphQL to make it a little bit more secure. And then the next step will be authentication. But down here, it's a very interesting part. It's like the WebSocket. So I built a little GUI here to manage your WebSocket. And I think this is the reason why it was not working before on the GraphQL playground. So let's stop this one. Okay. So you can add here servers. So you don't have to use just one server. You can use like 3, 4, 5 different WebSocket servers, as many as you like. You just have to do like the Apache config. So this is the Apache config. So you can see like the endpoint. You define like the port. So you have here the URL, and this points to a specific port, and the port can be defined here in this GUI. There's also like a debug mode, but I think normal person don't use it. But it will write like all echoes from the concrete5 to this subscription server log when you turn it on. So yeah, I used it for development when I started to use WebSocket, but I don't think anybody else will use it in the future, because when it's running, it's running. What I have to tell else is when you start this WebSocket, it starts a whole new concrete5 application. So that I can use like the entities and stuff like this, like the classes from the concrete5. I needed to run also like concrete5 on this WebSocket client. So it runs a whole instance of our application, of the concrete5 application.
Are you guys using this in production, or are you still working on this?
When it will be finished, we will use it on this project for sure.
That's
but
great.
it's not now running there.
That's very cool.
Yeah, it's very impressive.
Yeah, there's this button to restart all the WebSocket servers. Yeah, it's not a lot more to say about. I think it's quite burning your head now. But if there are any questions, just ask me on Slack. It would be really nice to have some person who try this and yeah, maybe find some bugs and yeah, to make it running stable.
I've got a couple questions for you if you'll let me ask them. One of them about the WebSocket server. Do you have any sense of how many clients you can handle on a single WebSocket server before you'd need to think about another WebSocket server?
Yeah, I have this. I have the same question, so I can give it back. No, I don't know.
Okay, yeah, because it's all magic to me, so yeah, I haven't been able to figure it out.
Well, he'll be able to spin up a new one when he figures out what that number is.
I think it can be a lot. It's also like quite important that when somebody is using it, like this one, like this view uses this WebSocket, or maybe like the most famous demonstration would be like a chat. So you have a chat and you always get the message in. So when you restart like the WebSocket here, it will disconnect all your clients. So they are not anymore getting the messages from your WebSocket. So it's really, think twice when you restart your WebSocket when you are in production.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to ask you about was about the GraphQL layer. Does GraphQL support like more complex aggregations and that sort of thing, or is it mostly just like a different way to format your REST requests?
So it's totally not REST. It's something new. It's like a graph, yeah, like the name says. And yeah, you can do really complex stuff and aggregation. You can do like could I say, give me all the person, could I call get people and then like sum up all their ages or something like that? Yeah, exactly. As when you connect, like when you have this,
that's cool.
Let's show it here. So when you have like this person, and this person here is connected to I don't know, like let's say to school or whatever, and you get this request, like this person object, you just can make like give me the school name. You understand what I mean?
Yeah, you can be more specific about what data you want to get out.
Yeah, exactly. You can just go down as far as you want.
But it sounds like you can do even more complex stuff before you get the data back. Like I was saying, the aggregation of summing up the or a better example would be like if you had a whole bunch of products or a shopping cart and you wanted to see how much money was in the cart.
Yeah, this is really nice. So you can just do it on the front end. You don't have to do like the server stuff behind it. Like in a REST, you always have to think which stuff I need in the front end, and then I do the server for it to get this request. But here you just do like the API. You define this API, and then on the client you just can get this information. So you just go down the graph. Yeah,
you can be more specific. That's cool. Yeah, this is all super impressive. It's really cool to see this stuff integrated with concrete5. I know how much trouble it can be to get concrete5 running in these kinds of, like you mentioned, in that WebSocket. So yeah, kudos. This is really cool.
Very cool stuff. So we have run a little long for our town hall, and I know we've got a lunch meeting that we've got to get to. Very cool. Yeah, it's exciting to see all this application stuff coming together with our platform. So I really, as I said earlier, feel like this is the direction that concrete5 is going to thrive in the future, is when you've got a site that does have some content, and you need the marketing staff and the operations staff to be able to edit that stuff, and you're not just building software from scratch, but you need something that it's a flexible framework that you can do really fast data retrieval, like we've both shown today, and things like Express, where you can quickly model objects out. Like, this is all pretty interesting and exciting. So great town hall. I don't know if we got a chance to get to any community questions. I don't know if we had many or not, but if we do, we'll try to answer those in the blog post that goes with this guy. Because Corbin, you've got a little bit of a drive ahead of you, and you need to get on the road.
That's true.
So I'm going to say thank you, everybody. Thank you, particularly Marco, for your demo. That was great. Made total sense. You did a great job. So
Thank you.
And it looks sweet. And I think we're going to sign off.
Yep. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.